if
Can
you're,
you hear my audio now?
yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I've been busy. I'm trying to figure out one thing. I'm trying to figure out is my carpet cleaning solution. I'm taking it vertical. So I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out what the best way to um, basically migrate all of the code in, like for my data viewer, my data tables, and all that kind of stuff, the all the JavaScript stuff,
Yeah.
because because that is essentially data and not schema.
Yep.
And so I don't want to have to, you know, re upload, or if I modify something, I don't want to have to do all of those individually. If I've got 10 seats out there or something, I don't want to have to, go through uploading it 10 times. So I'm trying to figure out a way to do that. What
Because
how
are
that
you using Auto or something to do a migration?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if
That's
only there's some way in the JS dev environment to save information in the scripts rather than the data.
yes, I know, Gabe. No, no, we have a good solution for you, and I think it's I've been Gabe and I have been talking this week. He is making some advances in the development environment, so I'll let him share that, and that should answer your question. I don't know how much of a lift it would be to transition what you're doing now to a newer version of the JS dev environment. We'll have to think about that. But Gabe, we may have to come up with a upgrade path for people if they want to
Pathway.
use
Yeah,
this.
yeah, we can have a think about that. So yeah, it's a good segue there, Doug. So I was looking at I was we were talking about this recently because I've have a vertical market solution, so I have that same issue where I want to save my widget code in the version in the FileMaker file. So when I do a migration for a new update, the new code and the widget comes along with it, and that's always in sync with the version of the file that they've got on. So everything is kind of packaged. I can do one deploy. They get the new version of the widget. In testing, they've got the previous version if there's been a feature or a bug fix added kind of in between. So what I've used for a little while now is this little insert text helper file, which basically is a little file made by Datamanics that allows you to paste in some text, and it generates the script step of an insert text field that you can then paste into your solution. Obviously, the insert script step normally is limited to 30,000 characters, which in the world of JavaScript is not that much. Whereas actually that script step supports as many characters as you can do, but it's just the dialog box itself. So what I was thinking about doing for a little while now is trying to work out if there was a way to use the JS dev environment to have that triggered automatically. So rather than you doing the kind of insert into a field, calling that file, generating the script step, and allowing you just to kind of paste it in directly. So if I'll just share my screen now, I've done a fork of Jeremy's kind of development environment. So obviously, as most of you will know, you've got this deploy to FM, which will clear the cache and then run the upload script. So previously, the upload script would then call a script with the kind of the value of your index.html as the parameter, and the script inside of FileMaker then sets that into into the kind of web viewer in here. So what I've done is in between, I've kind of split out the upload script into basically two methods. The standard one, which is what I've called record, and another option, which is basically insert text. So when the insert text script is called, effectively what happens is in the same folder as your project alongside the JS dev file, we've got this insert text helper file in here, which basically all it has inside of it is a startup script. So this uses base elements. So when the system starts up, it installs from a container field the base elements plugin if you don't have that already installed. And then effectively there's this set text field, which what it does, it takes the parameters, which is the the name of the variable you want to generate, the path, and an option to say if you want to show or hide the kind of confirmation. The system, which is not, this isn't written by me, this is written by I think it's Clive at Datamanics, that basically writes it out to a data file, reads it back in again, encodes that as an FMXML snippet, and puts that into the clipboard, and then allows you, that basically then generates an insert text script. So if I go back into VS Code now, so if I where's my console? So inside the widget config, I've basically added a couple more options inside of here, alongside where we've got our kind of widget name. So if I do the default behavior, which is insert text, so if I run this deploy to FM command, that's going to run it, and that's going to put into here my widget code. The widget's empty at the moment.
Into the field, right?
Field in here. So yes, obviously, if we were to run the script, debugger while that happens, we'd see that fires. It pulls in the value of the script, puts it in the widget, and then adds that from there. So if I want to change that method, so there's a default here which is insert, which is record. If I change that to insert text, what I've got is there's basically three more options inside of here. One is the name of the insert text helper file, so you shouldn't need to change that, but that basically is the name of this file here that runs. There's the variable name, which is the name of the variable we want to put it into, because effectively what we'll end up doing is having an insert text variable in here, which is going to have all sorts of thousands of lines worth of code.
So Gabe, I just wanted to interject because I was lost for a little while too. Insert text can insert it into a field, but it can also insert it into a variable. And so the goal here is that you want your solution to load all the widgets into variables on load. Was that the idea?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because I want the code to be stored in the script. So when I save this script and when it starts up, rather than putting it in a field, I'm putting it in a variable, which then I put into a global variable. So wherever someone is in the system, and that web viewer loads, rather than getting it from the field, it gets it from the kind of global variable. So what I do on startup is all my different widgets, I save them into a global variable. So then wherever I'm referencing, I can do that. Obviously, if I was to try and paste this text in to here and press OK, it's going to complain that the script is longer than 30,000.
Right.
30,000 characters. I'll make a change in there.
Could you accomplish the same thing if you took and you deployed that code, to a CDN or something, and then grabbed it from the CDN instead of grabbing?
Yeah, you could do. Yeah. For my solution, I find it quite useful to have that loaded locally in the system. It means obviously you're not then reliant necessarily on internet access, and the code for that lives inside of the file. With a CDN, you've still got somewhere else where you have to keep track of multiple different versions of that file that you have to then have a version number on, an increment or something like that. Whereas I find having the code stored inside here as an actual insert text.
This is more than 30,000 characters in what you just inserted there. It's just, and you're getting around that because you're using that helper file.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So basically it generates an insert text script step, which has more than 30,000 characters in it, but because it bypasses the dialog box, it behaves fine in FileMaker and has done for a number of years. It just allows you to have that set. So obviously a variable can be, terabytes in size if you really want it to be. It's just that for some reason FileMaker decided in an insert text script step we would have some arbitrary limit kind of on there. So now if I've changed my method to record, I'm just going to have a show confirmation dialog as true. So now
you're going to use the method of uploading it, insert text, right?
Yes, via insert text. So I'm going to run the same upload script. So I'm just going to run the deploy to FM in here. What this then does is, let me discard the changes to my file. is this basically uses the open command to open in the same folder as your project is, the FMP file. So if that file's closed, it will open it. And then in here, we're then saying, I'm hiding the window in here. And then we're saying, get the parameters, get the variable name which is provided in, and then the text, and then get the variable from the show confirmation. So if I look at the script parameters in here, we can see the parameters come in like this. So the path is the path to where the file is on disk, and the confirmation is set to be true. So I write out that file, read in the data file, so we can see, and it's loaded this into. This is just a global field in the helper file. Commit that record, and then it's generating the script step using the base elements to set that. And in here, then, if we've got show confirmation on, it will show me a dialog box that says an insert script step with a variable name $widget name has been added to your clipboard. This can now be pasted into any script. What this will then do is it will then close the file, so that file doesn't have to remain open. It opens it for a split second. Now, when I come over to my startup script over here, if I just press Command V to paste, that's basically generated me that variable name with the code of my file in here. So if I'm replacing, if I've got one in there previously, I can just paste that and then delete the previous one from there, and then hit save, and kind of so on. So effectively, you're getting all of the same advantages in terms of quickly making a change, doing a build. The only difference being is rather than inserting it into a text field, so if I run this with this off,
Begging.
then effectively what we'll see when I build in here, you'll see the
So
helper
essentially
file
all
flash
those
for a second.
gyrations are to create a script step that has insert text with that in it. Okay.
Yeah. So if I load that without any uncommitted,
Have you?
that will run.
Mhm.
That will flash for a second, and now I can go to my script, paste it in,
You got to do a manual pasting, yeah. Okay.
paste it in. Yeah, I mean, you could maybe do a keyboard maestro or some other shell script if you wanted to go and automate it to find a particular script or whatever. But for me, running that paste is relatively quick. It's not like I'm copying this information, pasting it into a helper file, typing in the variable name, copying it, coming over to my script, pasting it in, running my startup script, and then obviously when I'm doing this in my testing system, I then run my startup script again. It saves all of those into kind of global variables inside of there. So the idea being that the default method for this, because I think in a lot of instances, saving it in a record is probably the default method for it to kind of behave that way. But actually, having been able to do that is in certain instances, like for yours, Doug, where you're trying to keep that widget code saved in there, you're then able to do that. So obviously in here, there's the widget variable name, which is what gets pulled in with a dollar in here. If we want
so essentially, what has to happen, regardless of the method of doing it, is to have some step within your schema that grabs the data so that it becomes part of the schema.
Part of the schema, yeah. So then what happens is when the script is saved, obviously that gets written into the FileMaker database catalog file. When the user loads your system, it obviously loads all of that information, so that the difference being is you pay that cost once on startup, it generates that and puts that in a custom variable. Then wherever I'm loading a data table instance in here, this just gets set. I've got my web viewer in here, so when this when this loads, it then just sets the code into there. So in the same way that rather than running it via a get it from the record every single time, it's there in a global field, and you can reference that kind of whatever. And then obviously you could have, if you have multiple widgets, so I've got my data tables one, my full calendar one, and a bunch of other ones down here. They just live in a separate global field, which are then referenced elsewhere, kind of in my system.
Not a global field. Sorry, not a global field. Did you say global field?
Global field,
variable?
yeah. So when I start up, I write them into a local variable in here, and then set that to in my global table, so that wherever the context of that is, the user's always got access to that.
Okay.
And also, it is when you're doing that, it's slightly faster because every time you load the view, it's not having to go and get that record. You've already got it in a global field, so it's in the user's memory.
Yeah.
Which obviously, if you have lots and lots of very large libraries, that can sort of be the case. So one of the libraries I'm working on, the 3D tool I've shown a few of you. So I have the same thing in that, and that's 5 megabytes for the library itself. That's everything kind of included in there. So I wouldn't necessarily want to be going to a field to load 5 megabytes worth of text every single time that web viewer is kind of displayed. So having that in a global field, you pay that cost once on startup to set it, and then that information is always available. I think obviously FileMaker will do some caching if you load a record recently, but you're still relying on the non-deterministic behavior of FileMaker's local caching of records, which is fast right up until it's not. So, so yeah. So does that make sense to everyone? It's a relatively simple change to this. The only difference being this method kind of option in here. Effectively, the insert text script in here. Look at what it does. It basically takes in the widget name, but it also takes the name of the file in case you want to change that for whatever reason. It takes in the insert text variable name, and it has this option to say show confirmation. I thought it's helpful to have that initially to say this is what's happened and this is what to do, but if you're doing it all the time, you don't want that pop-up box to show every single time. So in here, the file URL, which is server, which in this, the default instance is the dollar symbol, which means the locally open file in the FMP URL, and then the file name inside of here. But because we need to open the file first, we're basically saying open insert file in here. I've got like a 500 millisecond timeout in here. Basically, that you have to wait for FileMaker to open that file. Which, if you don't have that delay in there, it can then try and call the FMP URL before FileMaker has had a chance to open that file. But effectively, that just delays that call by half a second in there. So. Obviously, it's loading that file locally, and that file is relatively small, so you shouldn't need to change that. But if you have an instance where that file takes a very long time to load for some reason, you might need to do that. Obviously, there's no way inside of Node to know when FileMaker has loaded another file. One option I did think about doing is leaving the helper file open, but have it hidden the whole time. But that sort of felt a bit icky, having a file that's just open there the whole time in the background. So actually opening and closing the file keeps it kind of nice and clean from that perspective. So then effectively we generate the parameters, and then
there's no async function for
FileMaker.
Yeah.
So I mean, basically the only thing you're waiting for is how long it takes to open this.
Yeah.
So, Gabe, is there any reason why that helper file couldn't be baked into the JS dev FileMaker file?
It could be, but then you might not necessarily want that code loaded in your file you're working on, because you may be working on a different solution in which you don't want to have to put in a worker file with some other additional fields. So
but that's basically just a worker file anyways, and the JS dev is also, I consider it a worker file, right? It's not my production file anyways, and that would just solve the problem that is the file open? Well, chances are, if you're deploying it and putting it into a script, then the JSDev environment is going to be open. So
I mean, the way I
Listen,
work,
guys, I got to. I think this is great. I got to go. Thanks very much for this. I got something else has just come up, but yeah, good to chat. Speak to you all soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, bye.
I think for the way I would work, I wouldn't necessarily do that because I'm always testing my widget in the context of the
Yeah.
actual application I'm working on, which obviously the widget file works when you're working on a widget with standalone data, and obviously I imagine most people when they're doing that they would replace that file with the file they're actually working
Sure.
on.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, it would be relatively simple to change that. If you wanted to change, this could be easily customizable.
It was just a question in terms of
Yeah,
if there was anything necessary about it being a separate file in terms of the
it doesn't
work.
have to be a separate file, no, because effectively the because the name of the file, which isn't here, that's
Right.
the file that normally when you're running that this insert record call goes to, the file in here. Whereas for me, I just have that as a little worker file in the background. It disappears, and then I can paste it into whichever file I'm working on, whether that's in a client's live file or in the development version of it, or other bits and pieces like that. The one of the things I had to do to kind of make this work was to allow this the insert script to run as a child process. So by default with Parcel, what happens is it will run the first one, and then it will wait until that process has finished before it runs the kind of second one. This is why when you do the run start, if it's running the local node server, it doesn't progress onto the next process until that process is finished. Whereby in here, having a way that uses this child process.fork allows basically the first one to run, and then it runs basically because in the package JSON, we can see in here it runs the build, and then runs the upload. And we want obviously the upload will only run once this is completed, but having it in a child process, which is in this upload file in here, allows this to basically to run asynchronously, where it can then tell it to run, and if it then returns an error, then we can capture an error in here if something goes wrong in the insert record or the insert text script, if that makes sense. This may be useful if other people want to overload a series of scripts in here to do like run this, leave the local node server running, but then also run a task to then upload it into the file into another file as well, if you want to do those both at the same time. So that's a useful little thing that I discovered.
Very cool. That's
Yeah. So once I figured out how to do a pull request into Jeremy's Git repository, I'm gonna try and kind of update that.
Nice.
So this would solve your problem, Doug, in that you can generate that script step that becomes something that is migratable, which is great. And you would just have to adjust the load widget script to you work with the variable, or with that variable instead of going to find that record.